Okay, this is part 3 of the Philosophy of Time series, not including the intro, of course. Last time I stated that Einstein's relativity raised questions about the order of causality, and I want to clarify that. I didn't mean to imply that Einstein did not believe in the order of causality. I didn't mean to state that relativity did not uphold the order of causality. I said it raised questions. If you can observe the effect before the cause in another frame of reference, all right, in other words, not in your frame of reference, but in another frame of reference, well, it doesn't violate causality because in that frame of reference you still have cause and effect, hence the arrow of time. In fact, I would say that cause and effect would be the arrow of time by definition. Now, there are some who say that the transition from order to entropy would be the arrow of time, and I want to get into that a little bit later on. But Einstein's relativity does not violate causality, and I want to make that very clear. In fact, Einstein was a big believer in the order of causality. When Gödel proposed the idea of time loops, he wanted nothing of it. So, no, Einstein did remain within scientific orthodoxy, and somebody in the last video took issue with my scenario of being able to observe, potentially set up a situation where you could observe the effect before the cause in another frame of reference. And I posted on there my defense of my argument that one could. But I'm going to make the point moot. In other words, even if scientifically that turned out to be incorrect and my facts turned out to be wrong, and again, I don't believe that they are, but if they did, Einstein was a believer in the idea of causality. He did not play around with ideas like time travel, or in the past, in other words, or anything like that. So Einstein, even though he did call time a persistent illusion, he stayed within the frame of scientific orthodoxy. Now, I'm going to get into John McTaggart a little bit in this video, who did not stay necessarily within the pale of scientific orthodoxy. If I had to define McTaggart, I would say that he was a right Hegelian. I would argue that he was an idealist Hegelian, probably a disciple of the right Hegelians long after their time. In other words, he was in the early 20th century. I don't know if he defined himself as a right Hegelian, but he probably would be a right Hegelian in the sense that he was an idealist. And so by his denial of the existence of space-time, one could probably place him within the realm of a kind of secular mysticism that Hegelianism has tended to produce. In particular, you might almost call it the closest thing that modern Western philosophy has to Buddhism, although you could also point to perhaps Schopenhauer. In any case, what was McTaggart's argument for the unreality of time, or the idea that the entire cause and effect arrow is something problematic philosophically? Well, before I get into it, I want to point something out that some people might take issue with what I just said about the cause-effect arrow being the arrow of time. There are those who would point out that the second law of thermodynamics is what determines the arrow of time, that the transition from order to entropy determines the arrow of time. And I would say that they may very well be right, and that may very well fix the arrow of time. I would say, though, according to statistical mechanics, that is an argument that boils down to probability. The increase from order to entropy becomes a probability argument according to statistical mechanics. And if we live in a finite universe, if it's proven that we live in a finite universe, it would be possible, very improbable, but possible, to go from not from effect to cause, excuse me, from entropy to order again. It's statistically unlikely, but it would be possible. If we live in an infinite universe, then sure, well, you have order to entropy. In that case, I don't think that would be possible. But you would have the shift from order to entropy, but you would have an infinite amount of both order and entropy. So curiously enough, by both definitions, how would the transition from order to entropy define time? It may be a law of time. It may be a law of nature or a law of science, but I don't know that it defines time. I would say that the transition from cause to effect would define the arrow of time, and I think that that's almost practically a tautology. But that's an article of faith. If you really think about it, the transition from cause to effect is an article of faith. I'm not saying it's not a reasonable faith. I'm not saying that it it underpins science. I understand that. And I would say that I have faith in it too. But the idea of an absolute faith in cause and effect is maybe where I would question. You know, I can't absolutely prove that you can't have something that exists in space-time, what we call space-time reality, that has neither cause nor effect, or has cause but no effect, or effect but no cause. All I can say is that I can't conceive of it, and that scientifically it seems to jar with my perception of common sense, but I can't absolutely disprove that idea. And that is something that philosophers of science, I think, maybe should grapple with a little bit more. Okay, McTaggart. What was his argument? Well, McTaggart broke time down into A series, B series, and C series. Now, A series would be tensed time, past, present, future. Now, yesterday, tomorrow. B series would be relational time. You would have a certain event, Pearl Harbor, December 7th, 1941, and then you would have 70 years and a day after that, a chunky guy in a cabin in his backyard talking about the philosophy of time. But you would not call that 70 years and a day after that now, meaning myself, and then before being Pearl Harbor. You would relate them from the standpoint of like an observer, like you're outside of space-time looking at different events, one each after the other, but not relating any one of them to the now. And McTaggart's argument is that the B series, which would be the philosophy of space-time believed in by both Newton and Einstein, in the sense that you have space-time as something real, that you cannot make reference to that without the A series. That the whole idea of before and after are made reference to using the A series. That in a sense, the A series, which makes reference to the specious now, or the immediate now, defines this more abstract idea of space-time, and that you cannot make reference to time without making reference to time. That becomes circular in the end. And it's an interesting argument. I haven't done it justice, because I would read The Unreality of Time by McTaggart. Even his critics acknowledge that he is a landmark philosopher of time. Understand that his argument is very complicated, but his argument is essentially that the idea of time is circular. I think one could find a hole in his reasoning and show that just because an argument is circular, well, you could still have it as a postulate. Maybe you can't prove it, but you could still have it as a postulate. But I would say it's an argument worth considering. Now, what does he believe might be possible? He does posit the idea of a C series, and a C series would be a series of events like Pearl Harbor, the JFK assassination, the resignation of Nixon, and myself doing this recording. Now, we would see those in a certain sequential order, but we can only see those in a sequential order with reference to the A series, past, present, future. If we could abolish the A series, then we could arrange those series of events in any order that we want. And he concedes that a series of events that are not necessarily ordered in a particular direction might be possible. Okay, so in a way, McTaggart divorces time from mathematics. He divorces time from the idea of ordering, unless we are the ones to order time. And that really, if he's right, that plays havoc with the whole idea of cause and effect, far more than anything Einstein ever would have proposed. Far more than anything any philosopher of science ever would have proposed. Now, McTaggart's argument, again, leads towards the idea of idealism, or the idea of space-time as ultimately an illusion, and this is something that mystics believe. And I think that he didn't succeed from my standpoint in proving his case, but I believe that he did succeed in raising valid questions. If we cannot order events, then we cannot order cause and effect. And we make reference to things like the increase from order to entropy, or cause and effect, by making reference to themselves. The increase from order to entropy is made reference to by scientific instruments that themselves increase entropy. Cause and effect is made reference to by our cause and effect reality itself. It's made reference to itself. So, although I don't think McTaggart ultimately succeeded, I think he raised enough interesting questions, more of which we will get to in the next video. So stay tuned.